Imagine a criminal enterprise so vast, so audacious, that its operations led to the largest single asset forfeiture action in United States history.
Yeah, we're not talking about a small seizure here.
Not at all. We are talking about approximately 127,271 Bitcoin. At the time, that was a trove valued at a staggering $15 billion.
And this massive digital fortune was allegedly tied directly to one man, Chen Zhi.
But this is so much more than just a massive financial crime, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this case rips open the operational reality of global fraud networks. What we're seeing here is the brutal fusion of high-tech cryptocurrency scams, what authorities call cyber fraud, with one of the oldest and most horrifying crimes there is, human trafficking and forced labor.
The U.S. Department of Justice didn't mince words on this.
No, they didn't. They described the alleged operation as a sprawling cyber fraud empire built on human suffering. And that phrase, human suffering, is really at the heart of it.
That's the core dichotomy we really need to wrestle with today, I think. You have these sophisticated multi-billion-dollar digital assets on one hand, secured on the blockchain, and on the other. They're funding literal prison-like compounds, barbed wire, guards, torture.
The scale is just unprecedented.
So our mission today is to move beyond the headlines, beyond just the arrest and extradition of Chen Zhi, the alleged mastermind of the Prince Group Transnational Criminal Organization, or TCO. We're going to dissect the precise mechanisms. How do these complex global fraud networks industrialize their crime?
And to do that, our deep dive is, rigorously grounded in verifiable facts. We've synthesized information from the U.S. Department of Justice indictments, Treasurer sanctions from OFAC, and extensive international intelligence reports.
So this is all coming from official sources.
Exactly. These sources detail the scale of these massive crypto scams, the incredible complexity of the money laundering, and of course the underlying human misery. We want to give you a comprehensive picture of not just what happened, but how it was allowed to happen.
Let's unpack this, and I think we have to start with the man at the center of the storm. Chen Zhi, often known publicly as Chen Zhi, spent years cultivating this profoundly polished public image. He was the founder and chairman of the Cambodia-based Prince Group conglomerate.
And when you say conglomerate, we really need to emphasize that. This wasn't some small fly-by-night operation. This was a massive, multifaceted enterprise designed to look completely legitimate.
What kind of sectors are we talking about?
Well, the Prince Group was everywhere. It operated across critical, high-profile sectors in Cambodia. You had massive real estate developments, high-end tourism, financial services, and very significantly, banking. Prince Bank became a household name.
So it had the appearance of a pillar of the community.
Absolutely. Chen Zhi was active in philanthropy, sponsoring scholarships, establishing himself as this model Chinese-born Cambodian tycoon. He even founded something called Prince Horology, which focused on Swiss-style watchmaking.
Watchmaking. That projects an image of incredible refinement, of legacy.
Exactly. It projects respectability. And that facade was absolutely essential to attract investment and, crucially, to blend illicit funds with legitimate revenue streams.
It's the ultimate lesson in criminal camouflage, really. You see the scholarships, the fancy watch boutique, and you just assume the foundation is solid. But the source material suggests a vastly different starting point for Chen Zhi.
That's the stunning contrast. If we look at his alleged reality before the Prince Group's rise, he reportedly started out managing a simple internet cafe in Fujian province, China.
From an internet cafe manager to an alleged TCO mastermind.
That transition, it's not an accidental leap. It speaks to a highly organized, rapidly scaled application of criminal acumen, specifically centered on leveraging digital tech and exploiting geopolitical gaps.
And the allegations against him and his network were severe enough to trigger this massive, coordinated international response. This isn't just a case of tax evasion or some localized fraud.
No, this is a global security risk. The international weight of the charges confirms that. The legal action from the U.S. was definitive. On October 14th, 2025, the indictment was unsealed, and it was comprehensive.
Can you elaborate on the specific charges? What exactly was he accused of?
He was charged with extensive fraud and money laundering, and these were specifically linked to what the DOJ calls large-scale forced labor scam operations and sophisticated cryptocurrency fraud schemes.
So they're connecting the digital crime directly to the human trafficking.
Explicitly. The indictment positioned him as the mastermind of the TCO. It said he built his wealth by trafficking workers, confining them in these prison-like compounds and forcing them to execute complex online scams. The U.S. prosecution sees him not as a simple businessman who crossed a line, but as the orchestrator of a vast integrated criminal system.
And the financial scale of the devastation here, it's hard to comprehend. The U.S. government estimated that Americans alone lost at least $10 billion to these Southeast Asia-based scam operations in just 2024.
$10 billion. And Chen Zhi's Prince Group was identified as a significant perpetrator within that ecosystem. Think about that. $10 billion lost by U.S. citizens in a single year. That level of loss is what triggered this massive response. It shows authorities are finally viewing these cyber fraud networks as critical national security threats, not just isolated consumer scams.
Right, which brings us to the coordinated international crackdown. This involved sanctions, freezing assets globally.
It was a decisive global action. The U.S. Treasury's OFAC, the Office of Foreign Assets Control, took the critical step of designating the entire Prince Group as a TCO, a transnational criminal organization. And that designation carries profound consequences.
What does that mean in practical terms?
It allows them to use powerful sanctions tools against the organization as a whole. They subsequently sanctioned 146 associated individuals and entities. It basically cuts them off from the U.S. financial system.
And the enforcement wasn't limited to the U.S.
Not at all. The UK's Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office, the FCDO, imposed parallel sanctions on the Prince Holding Group and on Chen Zhi personally. This coordination is vital because it denies the network access to major global financial hubs at the same time.
And the UK authorities made a specific link.
They did. They highlighted that the alleged profits from these horrific scam centers were being used to purchase luxury assets, including London properties. So they're directly linking the brutality in Southeast Asia to their own real estate markets.
But while the sanctions hit the legal structure, the number that truly defines this case is the crypto seizure.
This is the moment this case became historic. The DOJ unsealed a civil forfeiture complaint targeting that 127,271 Bitcoin, at the time valued at roughly $15 billion. The sheer magnitude of that is it's unparalleled.
I want to focus on that for a moment. That number is huge. But seizing Bitcoin is fundamentally different from seizing a bank account. How did they actually manage to get control of a decentralized asset on that scale?
That's where the forensic investigation really earns its stripes. Seizing that much Bitcoin is an immensely complicated technical and legal feat. First, it involves identifying the wallets where the illicit funds were ultimately pooled.
So, blockchain tracing.
Exactly. Advanced blockchain tracing, connecting the initial scam payments from thousands of victims to these larger aggregation wallets. We'll get more into that when we cover the money laundering. But once those wallets are definitively linked to the criminal enterprise, the legal mechanism of civil forfeiture is triggered.
But seizing a wallet means you need the private keys, right? You can't just send a warrant to the Bitcoin blockchain.
Precisely. Unlike a traditional bank account, seizing crypto means getting those private keys. Now, that can be achieved in a few ways. Cooperating parties, maybe the money launderers themselves or the exchange custodians, might surrender the keys. Or, if the funds are held by a custodian, like an exchange, they can be compelled by a court order to transfer those assets to a government-controlled wallet.
And this specific action was historic.
Officially the largest civil forfeiture action in the history of the Department of Justice.
That unprecedented figure just underscores the sheer industrialized volume of wealth these TCOs generate. It forces us to ask, how is this operation designed to generate billions so consistently?
It required a vertically integrated criminal model. They controlled everything from the recruitment of victims to the execution of the crime, the forced labor, and the money laundering.
Let's turn to that now. The precise mechanics of the fraud, the modus operandi, which really relied on two parallel tracks of victimization. We should start with the financial side, targeting the people who lose their funds. The methodology is notoriously known as pig butchering.
It is perhaps the most emotionally devastating form of cyber fraud today. Law enforcement in Asia often calls it jingliao, or scripted chat. The name itself, pig butchering, comes from the act of fattening a pig before slaughter.
That's grim.
It is, because the scam relies entirely on psychological manipulation and deep emotional investment. The perpetrators, who are often forced laborers themselves, build fake, intimate, often romantic relationships online. They use stolen photos, fake profiles across every major platform you can think of. LinkedIn, where they might pretend to be a successful finance professional. Tinder, posing as a romantic interest. WhatsApp, for daily chats.
And this relationship building isn't a quick thing. It's not a one-day affair.
Not at all. It's an emotional siege. It can last for weeks, sometimes months. They nurture emotional dependency, build absolute trust, and only once that deep trust is established does the conversation subtly shift to finance. The scammer suddenly reveals a secret investment opportunity, a guaranteed way to make a fortune.
And in this context, the investment instrument of choice is almost always digital assets, right?
Yes, since this wave of organized scamming really exploded after 2019, the financial instrument has become cryptocurrency, specifically stable coins like USDT and USDC,
Why stablecoins?
because they're pegged one-to-one to the US dollar. That makes them seem stable and much easier for people who aren't crypto natives to understand and acquire. Victims are directed to these fraudulent investment platforms that look incredibly high quality and professional. They're encouraged to invest a small amount first.
And I assume the platform shows them making a profit.
A huge, rapid profit. But it's all fake. The scammer just manipulates the platform's interface. That initial win is the psychological pivot point. It's the hook.
It validates the scammer and the opportunity.
It does. And then the scammers leverage several psychological techniques at once. They generate urgency. This window is closing. You have to invest now. And crucially, they exploit the sunk cost fallacy. Once the victim has invested a large sum and the fake platform shows a sudden, catastrophic loss, the scammer encourages them to double down to recover their losses.
And people do it.
They do. Desperate to recoup what they've already put in, victims will often take out second mortgages, empty retirement accounts, get bank loans. They surrender their entire life savings. The scammer only disappears once the money is stolen and laundered, leaving the victim emotionally and financially ruined.
That is the high-tech, sophisticated side of the crime. But that operation, running 247 in dozens of languages, requires massive staffing. And that's where the second horrifying element comes in, the forced labor compounds.
This is the true industrialization of the fraud. This is the human cost that drives the billions. These compounds, often located in special economic zones in countries like Cambodia, are the physical sites of dual victimization. The workers executing the pig butchering scripts were themselves victims, trafficked, confined in prison-like facilities surrounded by high walls, razor wire, and armed guards.
So these were not modern offices. What were the conditions like?
They were often run out of repurposed hotels, abandoned casinos, or these large purpose-built apartment complexes disguised as technology parks. We know operations were linked to entities like the Jinbei Group or the Golden Fortune Resorts World. Workers were forced to work 12-hour shifts, or longer, 7 days a week under constant surveillance.
And what happened if they didn't meet their scam quotas?
The source materials document systematic physical abuse, threats, torture, and even deaths inside these facilities. The gruesome murder of a 25-year-old Chinese national in 2023 was linked to one of these compounds. It's a stark reminder this isn't just financial crime, it is violent, organized crime.
The deception used to lure these workers in must have been incredibly effective. They came from over 66 different countries.
It's highly professionalized recruitment deception. The TCOs place these polished, legitimate-looking job ads on social media, promising high salaries for seemingly benign roles like sales, data entry, customer service.
So young, skilled people looking for an opportunity.
Exactly. They arrive expecting a legitimate corporate job and are immediately detained, their passports taken. They're then told they have to work off the debt of their travel and recruitment fees by perpetrating these scams. If they resist, they face torture or being sold to another compound operator.
And that creates a really difficult legal and ethical situation for authorities.
It creates that gray zone, as we call it. It complicates everything.
So we have the crime generating billions through digital assets. Now let's tackle the money trail. This is maybe the most fascinating part for anyone interested in financial crime. How did Chen Zhi and his co-conspirators allegedly clean up and move these colossal sums of crypto?
They engineered a highly complex, multi-layered financial infrastructure. It was designed specifically to obscure the source of the funds on the blockchain. They had two primary mechanisms. First, they used the Prince Group's own vast network of ostensibly legal businesses.
The classic technique of money laundering. You mix the dirty cash with clean revenue from legitimate operations.
Precisely. By running funds through businesses like online gambling portals, real estate purchases, and especially through Prince Bank, the funds gained a veneer of legitimacy. That's what made owning the bank so critical. It provided immediate access to trusted financial structures.
And the second mechanism.
Secondly, and this is key, they relied on highly sophisticated professional money laundering operations specializing in crypto. This involved advanced techniques that the indictments refer to as spraying and funneling.
We need to slow down and really explain what spraying and funneling mean in this context. These are the techniques that let $15 billion move undetected for so long.
Okay, let's use an analogy. Imagine you have a massive tanker truck full of dirty, illicit oil. Spraying is like taking that tanker and pouring just 1 tablespoon of that dirty oil into 1,000 different clean, completely separate teacups. You mix it up, move the teacups to 1,000 different locations.
So you're breaking up a large amount into thousands of tiny, untraceable pieces.
Exactly. You disaggregate large volumes of cryptocurrency, like our 127,271 Bitcoin, across scores of unrelated wallets. The individual transactions are too small and too fragmented to easily trace back to the original source.
Okay, that makes sense. So what about funneling?
Funneling is the reverse. It's the process of taking those thousands of small, obscured amounts, the contents of our teacups, and systematically aggregating them back into fewer, new, clean wallets. The criminal organization uses these complex, rapid-fire transactions to make sure the final wallet holds massive value, but the public blockchain ledger just shows thousands of tiny, seemingly unconnected inputs.
So it effectively masks the criminal origin of the money.
Ruthlessly. It exploits the pseudonymous nature of virtual currency wallets.
It's a truly industrialized financial cleanup operation, running in parallel with the industrialized fraud. And the ultimate goal was converting this digital wealth into tangible luxury assets.
Absolutely. The funds were used to buy a global portfolio of extravagance. We're talking high-end watches, luxury yachts, multiple private jets, vacation homes across continents, high-end collectibles, and even rare artwork.
The Picasso painting.
Right. The indictment specifically noted the purchase of a Picasso painting through an auction house in New York City. And that highlights the global reach and the reason U.S. enforcement had to act, even if the compounds were thousands of miles away.
The complexity of laundering billions through decentralized crypto and then immediately converting it into luxury physical assets worldwide. It just demonstrates how deeply embedded this Prince Group network allegedly was within the global financial system.
Which means if the system is that opaque, it requires global intervention. And that leads us directly into the enforcement actions taken, which focused less on the individual perpetrators at first and more on neutralizing the financial infrastructure that allowed them to transact.
Right. When you're facing a network moving billions across borders and manipulating crypto, traditional policing just isn't enough. This scale of activity forced international authorities to use some of their most powerful economic tools. The focus here was on targeting the critical financial enablers.
This is where the U.S. Treasury's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, FinCEN, played a decisive role. FinCEN issued a final rule under Section 311 of the USA Patriot Act. Now, this is a rarely used, highly aggressive tool. It's designed to protect the U.S. financial system from primary money laundering concerns.
For those of us who aren't experts in sanctions law, what exactly does a Section 311 designation do? Why is it so devastating for a financial institution?
The Section 311 rule is essentially the financial death penalty. It allows FinCEN to require U.S. financial institutions to stop opening or maintaining accounts for the designated entity. In this case, the target was the Huoni Group, a Cambodia-based financial services conglomerate.
And why is that so devastating, even if your money operates mostly in Asia?
Because virtually all global trade and major financial transactions require access to U.S. dollar clearing systems. By cutting off access to the U.S. financial system, you are effectively blacklisting the company from global finance. FinCEN designated Huoni as a critical node for laundering illicit proceeds.
And the numbers tied to Huoni are frighteningly large.
At least $4 billion in illicit proceeds laundered between 2021 and 2025. And what's profoundly interesting here is the type of illicit funds it was moving. It included proceeds from TCOs like the Prince Group, but also significant funds linked to North Korean state-sponsored cyber heists.
So the Lazarus hacking group.
The very same. So Huoni wasn't just working for one criminal enterprise. It was operating as a major professional criminal financial nexus. It was serving state actors and TCOs simultaneously. That level of interconnectedness is alarming.
It shows how intertwined these illicit economies really are.
It does. And the reaction to the sanction was swift and visible. Reports confirm that Hyoni Pay was seen actively taking down its signage in Phnom Penh almost immediately, and platforms like Telegram purged thousands of accounts linked to the group, disrupting their communication capabilities overnight.
But the TCO's ability to operate depends on more than just high-tech financial evasion. It requires a permissive environment on the ground. And that brings us to the serious issue of impunity and political patronage within Cambodia.
This is the shadow infrastructure of the scam industry. Cambodia is consistently designated as a high-H-risk country for integrity issues, largely due to its notoriously opaque official government information registries. When transparency is absent, organized crime flourishes. It becomes impossible for outsiders to accurately identify who owns what.
And this structural weakness is allegedly exploited by key individuals, these role shifters.
These role shifters are absolutely critical gatekeepers. They are local elites who successfully blend legitimate business, deep political connections, and direct criminal network involvement. They operate in that seamless intersection, allowing them to control the physical landscape.
They decide who gets licenses, where compounds can be built.
And how long they can operate without interference. They provide a powerful layer of political impunity to the compound operators. Their profile is often a well-connected real estate developer or a former military figure.
The source material goes beyond simply turning a blind eye. It alleges active complicity.
That's a crucial distinction. The allegations state that Prince Group executives allegedly paid specific bribes to foreign public officials for advance information on law enforcement raids.
So any attempted crackdown is just performative.
At best. We have documented instances where, right after a tip-off, workers were hurriedly moved or sold to different compounds in frantic nighttime relocations. The operation continues seamlessly, just under new ownership or in a new facility.
That makes the work of journalists and activists trying to expose this world incredibly dangerous.
It does. We've seen cases like with the reporter Mekdara, who reported extensively on these networks and was subsequently arrested. After he was released, he stated he was leaving journalism entirely due to fear and pressure.
It shows the threat is holistic. It targets financial systems, human lives, and the rule of law itself.
And this confluence of corruption and global pressure brings us to the final geopolitically complex action in the case, Chen Zhi's extradition.
The speed of that extradition was remarkable. Chen Zhi and two others were arrested on January 7, 2026, and extradited to mainland China within days.
The Cambodian government took decisive action right after the arrest. They revoked Chen Zhi's citizenship and ordered the liquidation of Prince Bank. The Chinese authorities publicly framed the extradition as a major achievement in bilateral law enforcement cooperation.
And this all happened right on the heels of the U.S. indictment and the sweeping sanctions.
Exactly, and this is where the geopolitical tension is palpable. The U.S. indicts him as a global TCO mastermind, primarily based on the victimization of Americans, but Cambodia opts to send him to China.
Why China?
Well, the complex legal and diplomatic maneuvering is clear. Cambodia is navigating immense international pressure. The U.S. had issued implicit threats about suspending trade tariff talks if Cambodia was deemed insufficiently responsive on anti-scam efforts. For a country already labeled high risk, choosing extradition to its primary political and economic ally, China, while liquidating the bank to satisfy international pressure, it demonstrates a complex calculus.
They're trying to balance conflicting global interests.
Right. And it highlights the difficult reality that prosecuting transnational criminal organizations is often less about pure justice and more about high-stakes international diplomacy.
This entire enforcement action, from the record crypto forfeiture to the political maneuvering, really defines the concept of a global criminal operation. But zooming out from the billions and the diplomatic chess game, we absolutely have to return to the profound human cost, the data and the reporting on the ground. They paint a clear, horrific picture of the suffering experienced by those trafficked into the compounds.
The documented abuses are extensive and systematic. We hear accounts of forced labor, constant threats, prolonged torture, severe physical abuse, and, tragically, fatalities inside these confinement centers. Survivors often describe being confined for months, beaten for failing to hit scam quotas, subjected to grueling physical exercise in extreme heat as punishment. These are massive human rights violations under the guise of business.
And one of the most challenging aspects for authorities and humanitarian organizations is what you referred to earlier as that gray zone. The fact that many trafficked workers are also coerced into becoming criminals themselves.
This is the devastating problem of dual victimization. The majority of trafficked workers are forced to execute these highly scripted pig butchering scams. This coercion complicates their status. While they are fundamentally victims of human trafficking, their hands are technically on the keyboard perpetrating the cyber fraud.
So it makes their rescue and identification as true victims much harder for law enforcement.
Much harder. Some reports even suggest a small minority who were successfully promoted might willingly stay just to avoid the abuse and leverage their position.
And that gray zone directly impacts the law enforcement and rescue response, often to the detriment of the victim.
It does. When police or consular services intervene, people removed from these compounds are frequently processed as immigration offenders rather than trafficking victims. This criminalization limits their access to protection, to rehabilitation, to assistance designed for human trafficking survivors.
And powerful people are ensuring it stays that way.
The source material indicates that local police in Cambodia are sometimes specifically instructed not to screen for trafficking victims if the compounds are owned by powerful local elites, the very same role shifters we detailed earlier. This risks severe re-victimization or just deportation back into a vulnerable state.
Looking at the macro level, the economic disruption caused by this industrialized financial crime it's hard to grasp. The figures are so large they compete with legitimate national economies.
The sheer financial scale threatens regional sovereignty and the rule of law. Scam operations in the greater Mekong region, Cambodia, Laos, and Myanmar generate tens of billions annually. The conservative estimates are just stunning. One analysis suggested that revenues from scam syndicates in mainland Southeast Asia defrauded victims of around $43.8 billion in 2023.
$43 billion. That's a profound number.
To put that into shocking context, another estimate suggests that the money generated from cyber scams in the Mekong region equates to 40% of the combined formal gross domestic product of Laos, Cambodia, and Myanmar.
Just sit with that number for a second. This isn't just organized crime. This is a fully parallel criminal economy operating at the scale of a state. 40% of the GDP of 3 nations.
And this industrial level of illicit activity fundamentally erodes social and economic trust. It destroys trust in digital finance and institutions when such massive financial crime is enabled by corrupt figures. It undermines sustainable development, it threatens peace, and it impacts every investor, every institution, and every citizen globally.
The Chen Zhi case, therefore, represents a monumental, necessary strike against a system that had seemed untouchable, precisely because of this scale and integration. The question now becomes, how do we translate this highly detailed, complex knowledge into actionable awareness for our listeners?
Understanding the structure is the strongest defense. Let's move to the key lessons we can take away for practical fraud prevention and awareness.
For our listeners, the learners out there, the practical application here is key. We need to move beyond generic warnings and understand the red flags from the perspective of how these massive TCOs operate. First, what are the specific warning signs for employment given the trafficking element?
The warnings have to be specific. You have to be profoundly skeptical of any foreign job offer advertised casually on social media that promises extremely high returns for roles like customer service, data entry, or IT support, especially if the location is a known high-risk zone in Southeast Asia.
And these ads look professional.
Very professional branding, but vague language. The common denominator is always the promise of unrealistic income for low-skill work in a foreign country. You have to remember, the scam relied on deceiving workers from 66 countries.
Okay, and from the investment side, how can a potential victim differentiate a legitimate opportunity from a pig-butchering setup, which is designed to be so emotionally manipulative?
The key insight isn't just, don't trust strangers online. It's recognizing the methodology. If someone you only know online, whether it's LinkedIn, a dating app, a message board, rapidly pivots the conversation from personal connection to promoting a high-yield crypto investment opportunity, that's a massive red flag.
The pattern is the key.
The pattern is always rapid trust building, followed by a shift to a financial scheme involving immediate use of stablecoins like USDT. The psychological markers are critical. The scammer will consistently generate extreme urgency, pressure you to invest quickly, and use that sunk cost fallacy to encourage you to double down on apparent losses.
So it's not the investment itself, it's the high-pressure, relationship-based, urgent nature of the pitch.
Exactly. When you see that pressure, you should immediately connect it back to the reality that the person typing those scripted chats is likely a trafficking victim working in a prison-like compound under the threat of violence. Understanding that the professional fraud you're seeing is fundamentally fueled by human slavery. It clarifies the nature of the threat.
Now, let's dive deeper into the infrastructure of the fraud. This is where the professional listener finds the most crucial insights for risk management and compliance.
The essential lesson here is understanding the convergence. These facilities must be viewed not as isolated amateur operations, but as complex, vertically integrated, organized crime hubs. They integrate three major elements: large-scale human trafficking, providing the labor; sophisticated cybercrime, providing the profit; and professional high-volume money laundering using crypto and legitimate fronts.
And their entire success relies on hiding behind legitimate-seeming private sector services that give them oxygen.
Critically so. The TCO's enabling infrastructure is supported by seemingly legitimate entities, ISPs and telecom operators providing illegal cross-border connectivity, financial fronts like Prince Bank providing access to traditional systems, high-quality construction companies building the compounds, online marketplaces like Huonei Guarantee, which allegedly sold scam-related equipment.
They're using everything at their disposal.
High-tech tools like SIM boxes for mass texts, even Starlink internet receivers, to maintain connectivity if local infrastructure is targeted.
So the final defense against global financial crime isn't just knowing about pig butchering. It's about understanding and demanding transparency from the ecosystem of corrupt political figures and legitimate business fronts that enable it.
Absolutely. Critical thinking about new digital finance and investment avenues is paramount for everyone. If a new digital pathway suddenly offers staggering high-yield returns with minimal risk, you have to ask, what is the underlying criminal infrastructure enabling this return? And who are the role shifters providing political protection that shields it from regulation? These systems thrive on opacity and complexity.
Which is why aggressive exposure, like the DOJ and FinCEN actions, coupled with individual awareness, are the ultimate countermeasures. The story of Chen Zhi and the Prince Group TCO provides a complete picture of modern, high-stakes organized crime. We've covered the arrest of the alleged scam kingpin, the rapid liquidation of his licensed bank, the unprecedented seizure of that 127,271 Bitcoin, a $15 billion crypto forfeiture, and the exposure of a TCO that brutally fused human trafficking with sophisticated cyber fraud.
And it was a decisive, globally coordinated action. It struck at both the leadership and the financial spine, especially with that FinCEN action against Huonei Group, effectively blacklisting a major laundering node. The case demonstrates definitively that the scale of cyber fraud has reached the level of a national security threat. It now requires aggressive TCO designations and the use of the most powerful economic tools available.
Chen Zhi's extradition to China is certainly a victory, a significant disruption, but the fundamental underlying conditions that allowed his empire to thrive, they remain fiercely active.
That is the essential, lingering thought we have to leave you with. The underlying environment, endemic corruption, notoriously opaque financial and governance systems, and the relentless speed of new technology. It continues to fuel this vast criminal industry. The scam compounds, driven by role shifters who blend business and political protection, remain highly mobile and highly adaptable. They fragment and relocate instantly when political pressure mounts.
So the fight is far from over.
Far from it. The ultimate goal of learning about scam networks is awareness, not paralysis by fear. We have to continue to follow the money, demand transparency from our institutions, and protect both global financial integrity and, most critically, the human beings exploited by these invisible criminal economies.
The challenge now is to apply pressure not just to the captured criminals, but to the powerful global ecosystem that protects the role shifters, enabling the crime to migrate and mutate.